So a little bonus piece to designing is filling things in with various things. I think the most common thing I've seen is once we get down into December, people for the Gateway Dirt Nationals, when we host it out, want to be able to add the Gateway Arch to their number, something you very typically see in real life. So a typical use case for doing this, is for these special events, adding that little bit of extra thing. So how we do that, we take a clip art for the Gateway Arch. We do everything as we normally would do. We're removing this white background. I'm going to personally remove the plane. And then lastly, doing the painting in to get the feathering effect. And now we're going to copy this and move this over to where our number is. We're going to put it in a layer above the number, and now we move it in and we resize it until it fits where we want it on the number. So for me, personally, it looks like right there is going to be good. And I bring it over to the other number as well. And then lastly on the third number. And now, because we only want it to fill in the number, the white part of the number specifically, we're going to use our magic wand tool to select that. We're now going to invert that selection and then go back to the section that we had with the Gateway Arch, and we hit delete. And now we can see it pop in. Now we can see once again some of that little bit of line shows up. We can fix this once again by just doing some paint bucketing until the feathering covers that over. And so now we have the Gateway Arch inside of our number. This is a number that's not very good for putting the Gateway Arch, but just showing you how it can be done. Now another idea is to add various textures. So for example, maybe we want this kind of holographic square prism type texture. Same idea. Once again, layer it over top of the number in all places. And same thing all over again, like so. And then we invert the selection and then click. Now in a case like this, this rainbowy texture, maybe we don't want it to be particularly rainbow. So in this case, what I would do is I would make this black and white. And then now I would make another layer on top. And I will select, holding down with Shift will select everything of the same style. So in this case, we're trying to select all the transparent on the, this is the segment that has the texture. We're going to go to the layer above. We're going to invert the selection so I'm on top of the texture. And I'm going to add a color layer. So over in this case, I'm adding red. And once again, as always, a little bit of feathering. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go and make this a multiply. And now we can see this red has been transferred into the texture of that holographic. And then if we aren't really sure exactly what color we want, but we know we want some kind of color, we can use our hue to kind of sort through until we find one that looks good to us. And do that. So these methods of blend, multiply, will actually add something to white. So if you have a pure white background, so for example, if I remove the texture, you can see this red applies directly to the white of the number, and it applies as if it's just basic red. Now, if it was black, so if I invert this, oh, wrong layer. If I invert this layer, you actually see the red doesn't show through at all. Multiply does not apply to black, it only applies to red. Now, if we only wanted something to apply to a black section, I will open up this section and make it blend to additive. So now this is the opposite of multiply. Generally speaking, those are the two blend modes that you're going to use on stuff. These other ones do some special stuff, but I'm not 100% sure of them. I don't use them that often. You can do basically everything you need to between normal, multiply, and additive. And then from here, we can play with the opacity to do other things as well. But that is a main way to colorize these textures. So you can also see how this red performs differently from additive to multiply. And so you can play with this and try to figure out different ways that you find an effect you like. And the same thing can be done for your design of your car. So let's say maybe I'm doing kind of an army theme thing here. So we have our camouflage here. And now we bring it over our layer section. And we make the camo the size I would more so want. And so with digital camo like this, you can kind of just throw it in there, and it really doesn't matter because digital camo is meant to have kind of these overlapping pixels and whatnot. But if for some odd reason you get some OCD about exactly how these are overlapping, your alternative option could be to take this and then look at what the size is. So 363 by 362. Copy and paste right there at the spot, and then just use this to get back to the size it's supposed to be. So this would be 363, and then you rinse and repeat, and you do that all the way through. You will notice like these things will keep showing up where it's the parts where they connect, because it is mirroring right over that edge, right? So there's symmetry. But anyways, after you finish with that, now what we want to do is we want to select all the white parts here, for example. And we can do that by holding down the select. And then we can do our typical invert selection and finish that out. And now we can see we have the camouflage on in there. Once again, the camouflage is having kind of that feathering effect where it's not fully aligned. So we can do about this, because it is a whole thing, you can't do much about that. We could add a bit of blur, and then it makes it just kind of look like it's part of it. Or you can use other forms of distort to mess with this. Otherwise, the alternative to being something like this is to, instead of selecting all the white, is to turn your tolerance lower and select the white once again. And then we invert our selection, but then this time we go back through with a higher tolerance and delete things that aren't white. So using the Alt tool, clicking on like the black section there. And you could go through and do this until you get your desired effect to create the design. Same thing can be done with regular camouflage. With regular camouflage, though, this is where I would have recommended the styling of the symmetry overlapping like this. Just because regular camouflage has like those more unique design to it, where if, for example, I just like copied over and over like this, you can see a lot of those like harsh edges where everything is like not really aligned. And so this is generally going to look better than the way that this has been done. And so that is a way that you can texture things in. And then alternatively, the other thing you can do is always add gradients to really change how a car's design is. So for example, we can do a like fading out to it. So I'm going to remove all of these. And so let's say I want this design to fade out as it hits the top of the door. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little selection box like so. And then using my render gradient bars, which is a part of the PyroChild plugin, if you noticed, I used the eyedropper tool on both the primary and secondary color of the body color. And that puts the same color in both of these segments. But if you only had one, you could easily just copy these numbers over. And now we remove the alpha in one of the directions. And so, for example, I'm going to remove the top one because we get the black on top and the transparent on bottom. And now I'm going to make the width more just so I can see it. And then now we're going to go down in, and I'm going to grab this chunk of the gradient and move it out and get it to the desired size I want. And I can move this across, maybe angle it a little bit, and then use our lasso tool to select through the opaque area. And now we have a gradient through there. Now alternatively, we could also only get this in the white section, similar to what we were doing before. You know, like so. Although, we're going to do that. Maybe something like that. So there's many different ways that you can work with that. Generally, my advisement for everything like this, though, is when you do these texturing on a design, you want to do this while the design is big before it goes on the car. It's just going to read a little bit better, prevents these feathering issues from happening, for example. So you'd want to use that layered file that you created of the design somewhere else if you're creating a very complex design like this via some form of tracing method, or maybe if you do freehand it, maybe freehand it really large and then bring it into the car. And so you can use those gradients on numbers, you can use the gradients, you know, like I was showing here, where it's part of the design itself in the design or outside of the design. You know, like this, where it's, you know, helping block the design off, like so. You know, it could also be the design itself, right? So for example, if we remove this and made our body color some other color, you know, the gradient itself becomes the design, right? And this could like lean into a two-tone design where the roof is blacked out as well. So there's many different little ways that you can go about this. You can even also make some additive to the design by doing another gradient through the gradient, which does give an interesting effect. So for example, and this time I'm going to flip the waves around. And of course, if you get the style wrong, you know, which direction the gradient's going, you can always flip it around with the rotate tool. But so for example, if you get the gradient inside the gradient, you get this kind of cross-fading of the gradients, right? So you can create all sorts of interesting little styles like that. And so for example, being very OCD about that. So yeah, play around with your extra tools and texturing, and it can really go a long way to build on the car further to create some interesting little designs.